Great. Well, I'm going to get started then. Good afternoon and welcome to all on behalf of Community Foundation Boulder County. I'm Jeffrey Rota, CEO of the Community Foundation. Thank you for taking part today and for taking time to understand more about how our local governments and others are leading the way to an environmentally sustainable future for Boulder County. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. You'll learn more about each of them as they share their vision and their collaborative work. And thank you to Hillary Hall, our moderator, a longtime partner and donor at the Community Foundation, whom I'll introduce in just a moment. We'd also like to thank the Community Foundation's Environmental Affinity Group, the Planning Committee, and the wonderful Peggy Driscoll, Brooke Kale, and Hannah Blum, who worked so hard to make this webinar happen. Finally, before we proceed, I want to acknowledge this time of great pain and also resolve. The staff of the Community Foundation considered very seriously whether or not to move forward with this webinar in light of the intense distress around the world at the killings of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and following a history of structural racism in our communities and our country. Lisa Moreno, our senior program officer, said, "Sustainability isn't sustainable without equity." We believe in the work and dedication of our panelists and in the power of redesigning the future to care deeply for our environment and all humankind. We hope their work and this discussion can keep us moving forward. Sustainability looks ahead to provide justice and resources to the people who will live in Boulder County for generations to come. On that theme of commitment to justice for all, I'd like to introduce Hillary Hall, our moderator today. Hillary served as Boulder County Clerk and Recorder for 12 years. We remember Hillary issuing marriage licenses to same-sex couples within hours of the 10th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals striking down Utah's gay marriage ban. We're indebted to Hillary for her legacy of voting by mail in Boulder County and her ongoing work nationally on vote at home access. Simply put, Hillary is a champion of democracy. Thank you, Hillary, and I'll now turn to you to moderate today's session.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for those kind words. It's been a pleasure to be a part of the Community Foundation and to be here today to talk about a topic that is so timely and so important to all that we care about, both in our community and in the world. It's appropriate that it is the World Environmental Day, and that we picked this day on purpose to have this discussion long ago, at the time just in the middle of a pandemic. So we're thank you for being here. I'm going to do a couple of housekeeping items and then we'll get on with the show. First, we'll save questions till the end. Those of you, if you haven't used a Zoom chat before, if you move your mouse, your choices should be at the bottom. You'll see a Q&A window with some bubbles that look like talking. Please type your questions in there and we'll take them all at the end. One other thing, after the panelists speak, we will take a brief pause and it's called promoting everyone to one big group conversation so that we can see you and hear you and feel more connected in these disconnected times. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get the PowerPoint going. And move on to the next slide. Thanks. So just an overview of what we'll be talking about. First, we'll set some context. Why is it so important? And then the point that Jeff already alluded to, and it's the work that our panelists have been very engaged in, is the importance of equity and climate justice. And then we'll go into the county and city sustainability services and programs to give you a full picture of all that we have going on here in our community. So next, yeah. So when we started this discussion for this panel, we really felt it was important to bring a bigger picture to our community and to those involved in philanthropy. We have so many amazing programs that go on in our county and in our cities, and they work really well together, and they also have some unique programs that they do. And then on top of that, we have nonprofits that help with the bridge some of those gaps, help amplify areas that need more attention. And so we really wanted to give you that picture of how do all these pieces fit together, and then how can you as a donor fit into that and understand, and maybe you continue to make the same choices with your philanthropy dollars, or maybe this will give you some new information of where you want to put that in order to create the world that we want to see. As far as the work itself and sustainability, I think all of that's happened in these past months really continue to amplify the importance, and the time is now to move on climate change, sustainability, our transportation issues, and our equity issues that are interwoven in all of those. I think for myself, it really, these past few months, really helped to show how interconnected all of our issues are, and that we need to take a holistic approach to address them, both with our programs and our strategies and our political leadership, as well as our dollars and the funding that we give. So I hope at the end you'll have some new understanding or some enhanced understanding of what we do here in Boulder County at the local and the county level, and the programs that we create here that then also go on to have a national and international impact. And with that, I'm going to introduce our panels here. We have, we're so pleased and really so appreciative of our three panelists. Our first panelist will be Lisa Knoblach, who's the Sustainability Program Manager at the City of Longmont. And we have Jonathan Koehn, the our next panelist will be, they're written in the wrong order, apologize. Our second panelist will be Susie Strife, and she's the Director of Sustainability, Climate Action, and Resilience for Boulder County. And then Jonathan Koehn is the Chief Sustainability and Resilience Officer for the City of Boulder. And I'm not going to go into an in-depth of their biography in order to give you all plenty of time to hear from them, and then to get to the most important part, which is our conversation afterwards. There is, in your invite, there's a full bio there, and then I think we're going to put up some links. Yeah, we have some links in the chat that you can also look at to learn more about our panelists. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lisa, and thank you all again for being here.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Lisa Knoblach. It's a hard last name to pronounce. It's actually German for garlic, so you could also just call me Lisa Garlic. I'm the Sustainability Program Manager for the City of Longmont, and I'm really happy to be speaking with you all today. I don't have quite so much light behind me there. I want to say thank you to Hillary for the introduction, and to Jeff for acknowledging the moment that we're living in right now, and once again bearing witness to such abhorrent acts of racial violence and police brutality and the pervasive impacts of systemic racism and oppression that play out in our country over and over again. And although we could spend this whole time discussing that and how it impacts every aspect of our lives, no matter who we are, but particularly is impacted by the daily actions and decisions by those of us with more power and privilege. Obviously, we don't have the time to do that, but I do want to acknowledge that it is very relevant to the work that we do, and say that it is our job as folks with power and privilege to really step back and listen to the stories and lived experiences of people of color and Black people in particular, and really use our power to elevate those voices, and to really understand that to just be upset and see all of this as somehow separate from ourselves and the work that we do helps to uphold that unjust system. So we'll be kind of talking about that sort of throughout our presentation today. I'm going to be talking about climate justice, what it is and why it's important, and you can actually advance to the next slide there. There we go. And why it's relevant in framing our conversation today. in light of recent events and really and the importance of addressing how that impacts and is impacted by our work in sustainability at the municipal level. Because really working in municipal government, we are part of that system, and we really do have a role and responsibility in addressing that and ensuring that our work in sustainability and climate action is committed to and in service of transforming that to be a more just and equitable system. Next slide. So before I really jump in, I want to highlight this quote by Adrienne Marie Brown. It's not exactly 100% verbatim, but she was a keynote speaker at last year's Urban Sustainability Directors Network annual meeting, and her words just feel particularly prescient right now, where she speaks about moving at the speed of trust and not at the speed of urgency. And although that feels really challenging, it also feels really important, because it's really only in taking the time to listen and build genuine trust and relationships that we'll be able to create the movement that's required to shift our society to one that values the lives of all people and the health and well-being of the planet that sustains us. Next slide. So what is climate justice? I'm sure this is probably a term that folks have heard, especially in the last year with the incredible work of Greta Thunberg and amazing folks in the Sunrise Movement. But this is actually an evolving concept that's rooted in the environmental justice movement that's been around for decades and has done really incredible work. There's not really a formal definition, so I wanted to highlight kind of a homegrown definition from the Plan Committee that we have in Longmont, which is local policy and personal habits that reduce climate pollution and increase community resilience in ways that do no harm and support all communities according to their needs. And really what climate justice means is acknowledging how a legacy of racism and oppression have resulted in a grossly unequal society. It's really rooted in an extractive economy that sees both communities, some obviously more than others, and the planet as expendable. And that really we can only hope to find real solutions for a healthy and livable planet by shifting power and resources to those that are most impacted by these intersecting crises and injustices. And why is that important to really focus on now? Aside from what we've been talking about, historically the environmental conservation and sustainability fields have been pretty dominated by folks from more privileged identities, and that has led to a more narrow narrative and focus in ways that often haven't really taken equity and justice impacts into account. And sometimes that's just resulted in a missed opportunity for collective impact and relationship building, but sometimes it has actually resulted in causing further harm or exacerbating inequities. And the reality, what we're seeing now is that we also haven't been able to come close to moving the needle to where it needs to be to urgently address climate change, even though we have had some successes in environmental protections like clean air and clean water. Although those benefits and improvements are not universally experienced, we still have a lot of work to do. And communities and organizations that have long been doing sustainability work are really recognizing that and shifting our focus to really center equity and justice and working to build and repair relationships with frontline communities who have been fighting on the environmental justice front, not only for environmental protections, but to really address social and economic injustices on a systemic level. And we're at a point now where we just really no longer have the time to continue to ignore climate justice, and we really have to approach our work from a justice perspective if we want to see real change. Next slide. So the tenets of climate justice, these are highlighted from a group called Front and Centered, which does great work that I definitely highly recommend folks check out if they get a chance. But these tenets, even though we're talking about climate action and climate justice, are really applicable to any issue beyond that, because they're really focusing on that systemic change that we've been highlighting. And I do want to read through these because I think they're really pretty important to highlight. So looking at acknowledging past policies and decisions that actually maintain a system of injustice and accounting for that. Following the leadership, knowledge, and expertise of communities that are disproportionately impacted, which are what we've referred to as frontline communities. Using racial and economic analyses to drive decisions, using targeted strategies that create benefits for all, and then creating net environmental and economic benefits for frontline communities. Next slide. Why is it really critical to center climate justice work, particularly in Boulder County? So aside from the larger issues that we've mentioned, we know that people in Boulder County are already struggling. So in Longmont last year, we conducted a community survey through our Just Transition work, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute, but really looking at trying to understanding the needs and barriers, particularly around energy services in Longmont. But we saw some pretty striking statistics that are highlighted here that really show these disparities that are rooted in historical injustices that stem from systemic oppression. So some of these are pretty, just looking at 54% of respondents kept their home at a very uncomfortable temperature to avoid their utility bills. That's an incredibly high number of folks from our community that are experiencing those things today. And really, without addressing this in our climate action work, we actually risk perpetuating inequities and potentially causing further harm through impacts on affordability and livability, and really understanding who bears the burdens of the changes that we're actually trying to seek and who reaps the benefits from that. And at the same time, there are really great opportunities for us to address both climate change and social and economic injustices, again, if we really take the time to do it right. Next slide. So what are we doing to advance climate justice? Writ large, we are shifting the conversation, as I mentioned, in the field of sustainability. That's happening in communities across the country and across the world that are really starting to move to center equity and justice in the work that we're doing. And that is a real challenge, but that's also in some ways the easy part. It is starting that conversation. The hard part is really getting to doing the actual work of changing who makes decisions and how we allocate resources and how we prioritize action. But it's also very inspiring to see those conversations happening and those commitments taking place. And that's reflected in organizations like the Colorado Communities for Climate Action, which Jonathan will touch on a little bit later, where we're really starting to see that equity and just transition language getting incorporated into organizations like that and starting to really prioritize that in their work. We are also doing both Longmont, I know also the city of Boulder and Boulder County and many other communities are doing internal equity trainings and really looking at deeply the role of government in equity and inequity, and building internal capacity so that we can make those real changes. And I know Susie's going to talk about examples of what the county is doing, and many of the programs that she highlights are things that the city of Longmont and city of Boulder support and participate in. But I just wanted to take a couple minutes to highlight some of the work that Longmont is specifically doing in this area. The first of which is the Sustainable Business Program, which is still pretty new. It was formally launched just last fall. That's run by our economic sustainability specialist, Bernice Garcia-Tellez. And we really focus on intentionally not using the term green business program, but to focus on the triple bottom line of sustainability and incorporate those social and economic factors as well. It's a bilingual program that actively engages the Spanish-speaking businesses in our communities, and it's getting quite a bit of recognition for those efforts as a model potentially for others to follow. So that's really exciting for us, and we're putting a lot of emphasis and focus on that program right now. The Resiliency for All initiative is not housed within sustainability, but within our Community and Neighborhood Resources Division, who we do partner with quite a bit on neighborhood and community-based sustainability work. But I wanted to highlight it because it's a pretty important initiative that came out of the 2013 floods, which was a pretty stark reminder of how Spanish speakers in Boulder County appeared to not have the same level of access and support and resources as the greater community. And they went through and identified barriers and determined recommendations to help foster greater resilience and equity in the county. And so that's very relevant to the work that we do around sustainability in particular. And we're actually seeing some of the impacts of that now with COVID-19 about the great things that were put into place, but also seeing that there's a lot of work for us left still to do. Next slide. And then a program that I want to specifically highlight is Longmont's Just Transition Plan efforts. This has been led by our water conservation and sustainability specialist, Francie Jaffe. And this work started probably close to about 2 years ago. We have a pretty strong history of a focus on equity within our sustainability program, and we had been looking at just transition work. But this focus became a little bit more formal after our council committed in 2018 to transitioning to 100% renewable energy by 2030. And we wanted to ensure that that was done in an equitable way. And was also identified as a key strategy in our greenhouse gas inventory. So last year we conducted the community survey, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. We held a number of workshops that were focused on bringing different folks together to discuss and understand the impacts and implications of environmental policies and decision making. And then we launched in January the Just Transition Plan Committee, which was actually already in the works when our council passed the climate emergency resolution back in October, which called for the convening of a climate action task force to develop climate action recommendations. So we really saw that as a great opportunity to put those core tenets of climate justice that I mentioned a minute ago into action, and really utilize the Just Transition Plan Committee as an opportunity to advise the Climate Action Task Force on how to integrate equity into climate action and develop additional recommendations to help advance equity in our community. And both of those groups are developing recommendations reports right now that'll be going to council later this summer, and we hope that we're able to continue that work beyond that point, because it's been really an invaluable process for us. Next slide. And then lastly, I really just want to bring this back to the idea of this transition from an extractive to a regenerative economy, and what that means and what the vision for that is. And that's work that we have been doing in sustainability for quite some time, as our thinking really has shifted to more addressing systemic change. And although we're really facing numerous challenges and heartbreaking suffering with COVID right now, and I definitely don't want to diminish that by any means, as we look toward recovery, it actually presents an opportunity for us to continue to accelerate this transition. And again, I want to highlight the importance of taking the time to do it right and to build the relationships and work together and build back better through a lens of justice and equity, because we know that those folks that are being hit hardest by COVID and the other issues that we've been discussing are also those that are and will continue to be the most impacted by climate change. And that's not coincidental. That's a result of a legacy of injustice and structural oppression, and that government, municipal government, plays a pretty key role in that. And it's really our job to break that cycle and create new structures and relationships with equity at the center in partnership with frontline communities. And in doing so, we can enhance community equity and resilience and reduce this risk for future crises, whether that be climate change or otherwise. We know climate impacts are coming. That allows us to improve public health and improve economic resilience on the individual and community level through living wage jobs and workforce development and diversification of our economy that's really rooted in a clean energy transition. And that ultimately we recognize and are working toward the vision of that the well-being of the planet is really critical for the well-being of our communities and vice versa. So that work needs to happen together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susie.
Thank you, Lisa. That was excellent. Next slide, please. So building off that great point that Lisa just shared, the well-being of our climate and planet is directly linked to the health of our community. It is well known that the local impacts of climate change, there will be a range from increase in high heat and wildfire danger to increase in unpredictable precipitation and potential flooding. These conditions will certainly impact our quality of life and the safety of our residents. Next slide. What's not often talked about, however, is the costs, and they're overwhelming when you look at the economic costs associated with these extreme conditions, which will place a burden on our taxpayers to pay for these damages caused by climate change. For example, when looking at roads just alone, how future climate conditions could impact our roads, it's estimated that a cumulative $81 million by 2030 over a historic baseline. And this is using, just for reference, a very conservative model, a median estimate. If you use a climate model that projects a smaller amount of overall emission reductions in Boulder County, our cost rises just for roads alone to $183 million. In addition to our roads, a majority of climate scenarios project increased water flow in Boulder County, which will result in a required $14 million in improvements to Boulder County bridges, and that does not include culverts. And then finally, if you look, the analysis that we've done with a local firm called Resilient Analytics shows that non-residential buildings in Boulder County will experience a cumulative increase in cooling costs by 23% by 2030. And if you extrapolate that data to the residential sector, knowing that a good portion of our single family and multifamily residents do not currently have air conditioning, there will be more health and economic impacts from the projected heat extremes. And so we really need to start preparing for a different future, and also spending as much capacity as possible on strategies to reduce our impact. Next slide, please. So, next slide. Thank you. So we're really working on specific climate strategies to reduce our impact. Next slide. And this shows the sources of our greenhouse gas emissions per sector from kind of our countywide greenhouse gas inventory that we undertook in 2016, and we'll do another one in 2021. In some ways, these inventories really help shape the programs and services that local governments offer, because it's really difficult to manage what we can't measure. If you take a close look at the commercial and industrial sectors as well as the residential, and you combine those, you see that 60% of our countywide emissions come from these two sectors. And this is all the heating and lighting, electronics, and air conditioning we do every day. And another large chunk is our transportation, which is at 31%, or a third. It's derived from our transportation emissions. So if we really want to have an impact on reducing our local carbon emissions, it starts in our homes and businesses, on our commutes, and cleaning up the generation of these power sources. Next slide. So in response to this, we've launched several countywide services geared towards decarbonizing these sectors, and I'm really excited to share with you some of these, and Jonathan will also build off of that. It's important to know that what we do in Boulder County and all of our munis across Boulder County is really a drop in the bucket to what's called for, and I think everyone probably on this webinar knows that. Yet what we try to do is strive to offer programs that achieve local carbon reductions, and have those programs be pilots so that others, when successful, can be replicated across the nation and the world. Next slide. So we have been offering these services called Energy Smart and PACE for quite some time, and they're award-winning services that help homeowners and businesses across all of our Boulder County communities to become more energy efficient and adopt renewable energy. The basic premise of these two programs and Efficiency Works in Longmont is to really have an energy advisor or a sustainability advisor serve as a liaison to homeowners and businesses to help support the adoption of energy upgrades, renewable energy, water conservation measures, electric vehicle adoption, as well as heating and cooling technologies that transition away from fossil fuels. What's wonderful about these programs is they make it so easy for people to participate. The advisor's there to fill out rebate forms, provide technical assistance where needed, and offer additional incentives from local jurisdictions or from the county or from our utilities. So they really make the process very easy. I think most important and relevant is that we're centering these services on equity to ensure that we're serving those that are most in need in our community. We have bilingual advisors and offer free energy assistance through partnerships with great nonprofits like Energy Outreach Colorado, which offers a weatherization-like program through Energy Smart. And that's available for those in the 80% AMI down to the free weatherization assistance program upper threshold. And we also work with the City of Longmont's Power and Communications Utility on a similar program offering free energy efficiency upgrades to multifamily units in Longmont. And this really ensures that we're helping not only reduce utility bills, but we are helping make living spaces more comfortable for vulnerable residents. And it pertains to Lisa's great slide about people being really uncomfortable in their homes and living spaces. Through these programs, to date, we've served about 19,000 homes and 3,800 businesses and spawned more than 62 million in the local economy. And so that's really exciting. They're kind of economic powerhouses. We've been able to measure our return on investment, and we did an analysis completed by a third party that shows for every dollar that we spend on these programs, between 5 and 9 is recirculated into our into the clean energy economy. So that's really exciting, and it's local businesses that we're supporting there. In addition, these programs have supported just under 4 megawatts of solar on homes and businesses. So that's distributed generation right here in our local generation, right here in our Boulder County homes and businesses. And that feels really good to be able to support our local contractors, our local solar contractors. With that, we offer solar rebates, and the City of Boulder offers a really unique program for solar grants to help those who are really struggling to provide and get solar access. And another key piece of this is offering innovative financing, because as many of you know, solar typically requires a larger upfront cost. There's a growing need for affordable financing. And so we've been helping develop some energy loan products through the Clean Energy Credit Union, as well as the energy loan through the Elevations Credit Union. And these provide lower interest loans for residents wanting to undertake these initiatives. So to me, what's really important here is that we're providing access to clean energy. And so it's really a part of this equity work we're striving for. And later this year, we're hoping to pilot subsidization for solar garden subscriptions for low-income qualified households. And also, with that said, workforce development is absolutely critical. And we are really trying to help support workforce development through our community solar gardens in training with great nonprofits like Grid Alternatives, who provide hands-on training for unemployed Boulder County residents to make a pipeline for employment into the solar industry. Next slide. Oh, there are the pictures. Thank you. So as you saw, a third of our emissions come from transportation, and this will continue to grow as the electric grid gets cleaner. So there's a real great emphasis and focus on providing strategies for reducing our impact in the transportation sector. Next slide. All of our communities, City of Boulder, Boulder County, Longmont, and other counties, communities are really deeply committed to accelerating the adoption of electric vehicles and supporting EV charging infrastructure. A couple years ago, we led a first of its kind pooled purchasing initiative to accelerate the adoption of solar electric vehicles and electric bikes. And this pooled purchasing program has been replicated across the nation and has really helped accelerate the adoption of these technologies, both locally and nationally. We work with partners such as Charge Ahead Colorado to incentivize building more public EV charging stations. And then what's really key here too is providing more transit opportunities and mobility options, especially for those in need. Mobility for All is an exemplary program that the Boulder County Transportation and Community Planning runs. It provides multimodal transportation assistance and fosters collaboration between transportation and human service organizations. So it's a very holistic service for our vulnerable populations. Next slide, please. There are so many exciting initiatives going on in the local food and ag space, and I'll try not to take too much airtime because I know Jonathan has some great slides to share. Next slide. So the county and cities are offering great programs that increase healthy food access for those in need. This year, we've actually been working with Boulder County Farms to provide free CSA shares to 111 families enrolled in women, infant, and children programs. And we provide hundreds of fruit and vegetable vouchers that don't qualify for food assistance programs. This other really unique program called Double Up Food Bucks, it basically doubles the amount of food benefits that can be used to purchase fresh produce, providing access to local healthy foods to lower income individuals and families. And this is really neat because while it launched in farmers market, this program recently expanded to retail locations like Whole Foods. And so it really helps families purchase more healthy and local produce. In addition, we've been working with some amazing carbon scientists at CSU, and the county and cities are supporting carbon sequestration efforts by measuring the benefits of carbon farming practices on Boulder County lands. And Jonathan will cover a little bit more about carbon sequestration later, but this is a really exciting opportunity for us to support not only our local farmers, but also carbon sequestration through carbon farming. With the Boulder County Sustainability Tax Funding, we've been working on ways to better support our local producers. And this year we launched a pool of funds dedicated to regenerative agriculture practices and infrastructure for our local farmers and producers. We just supported them with $305,000 from the sustainability tax, and we're excited to share the results of that later this year. And the county finally is really excited to explore how to build a local compost facility, as adding high quality compost to our soil enhances carbon sequestration, increases water retention, and helps regenerate our local soils. I think creating a local compost facility will also help capture more organics from the landfill, reducing methane from our landfills. And this is a real initial stage design that we're in right now, and it's very exciting opportunity to create a closed loop system whereby the waste of our local residents and businesses, as well as other feedstocks, will go to a local compost facility that will then create high quality compost to put back on our ag lands, backyard gardens, and municipal green spaces, putting nutrients back in the soil where they belong, and sequester carbon, as well as support the growth of nutrient dense foods. So it's sort of a win-win-win idea, and we're really excited to start exploring that. It's important to know that I have a limited time, so I'm not going to get into circular economy or other zero waste infrastructure that we're supporting, but I appreciate your time, and I'm going to hand it over to Jonathan to talk more about our role in policy and partnerships.
Great. Thank you, Susie. Hopefully everybody can hear me. Greetings from the safety of my basement. I actually wanted to start with a little bit of gratitude. I just wanted to say how honored I am to be on a panel with these two extraordinary women. Lisa and Susie really are, I think, leading in so many ways, not just here in our region, but nationally. And so just really honored to be part of this panel. Of course, I also want to extend my profound appreciation to the Community Foundation and of course the Environmental Affinity Group. I really appreciate all the work you're doing. And, you know, the introduction I think was really important because, you know, during this time of what I consider to be extreme turbulence, I think the work that you all are doing is so vital in maintaining that sense of community, which is really grounding for all of us. So, you know, to start, I would say if nothing else, you know, so far 2020 has been a year of regaining some perspective. You know, I guess a silver lining of hard times like this is that they inspire some introspection and I guess focus. So what matters most to us and how do we live up to that? And, you know, as it relates to this discussion of sustainability and climate change, I think that the pandemic has given us a preview of the kind of disruptions that climate change are likely to bring. But it also really underscores this important duality of how we can continue to be courageous, visionary, and collaborative at the local level on issues like sustainability, resilience, and climate change, when we're also dealing with kind of the real issues of our economic and social crises and the existing bandwidth that people have for this kind of work. So I just want to kind of whiz through a couple of slides because I'm really eager to get to some of the conversation. So go ahead and move to the first slide. I wanted to start at the macro level a little bit. And it's clear that sustainability, climate action has really been a key focus of both the community and our city council in Boulder for quite a long time, as it has been in the region. You know, we've been at this. And there's a reason that Boulder County communities are seen as national and sometimes international leaders in this space. What I would say is that the context within which Boulder and other communities consider how to address these issues is really changing fast. So what's led to our success is understanding our role and how it's evolved and what we've learned along the way. So fundamentally, I think there is this emerging context of needing to more effectively align with key community values. So I often joke around that the long-held belief is that the role of local government is often considered to be, you know, we're here to fill potholes, lock up bad guys, and put out fires. But if you think about the true function of local government, it's to enhance the health, safety, welfare, economic productivity of our communities. And I would say, in short, our job is to allow our communities to flourish. How do we make lives better? How do we create grounding actions and local benefits that deliver tangible, local, quality of life benefits while contributing to overall emission reductions and sustainability principles? So I would say that our role has evolved, and what we've learned and maybe what our assumptions have changed over time. And so I want to just talk about those briefly. So the first, and perhaps one of the most challenging to let go of, is the notion that if we can just get each person to change their behavior, then the larger system will change. But we have to sometimes stop and consider what we're asking of most people. You know, in the case of energy, for example, in most cases, we're asking people to do things that are maybe more time consuming, more complicated, more difficult, more expensive than going with the status quo, whether that's switching furnaces or water heaters or heat pumps or buying electric cars. I think we're expecting people to go against the flow to do the right thing. And that hasn't worked, and I would say probably won't work. So we need to stop trying to change behavior necessarily and figure out how to change systems. Now, this may seem somewhat provocative, and I'm not saying that individual behavior change isn't meaningful. It is. It's truly essential. But what we are working on is figuring out how individual behavior change leads to collective actions, which leads to systems change, and how we're rooting our work in those values. The second point is that the city champion strategy isn't necessarily spreading. And that's the underlying assumption that as leading cities demonstrate that they could successfully achieve emission reductions or develop sustainability practices within their boundaries, they would inspire other cities to adopt and achieve, I guess, similar goals and objectives. And I don't think that that has really played out like we hoped it would. So third, cities need to learn to work more effectively outside their boundaries. We have done an extraordinary job at this in our region. How are we collaborating more effectively outside our boundaries, amongst our jurisdictions, looking at regional issues that are not geographically bound? Fourth, we have realized the importance of forging new and creative partnerships. Local government does not always need to be at the center of this work. We can be a facilitator, and finding new creative partnerships has proved to be really, really important. And fifth, we really need to understand the role that progressive policies play. So how do we kind of remove the restrictions that exist that we keep bumping our heads on so we can be more effective in the work that we're doing? So you can bump to the next slide, please. So how does that show up? The role of cities has evolved. And as we think about it, it starts to look in a way of how do we create efforts, projects, programs that are innovative, that we can test and adapt, that we can scale and replicate. And that is a really important piece of this conversation today, the scale and replicate, because part of what we seek is partnerships on figuring out how to do that. How do we create these new partnerships and collaborate to make those kind of systems changes? So this area right in the middle of the slide that's kind of bound by the box, this research, partnerships, and collaboration that leads to policy and market change. It seems very wonky, but this is the area that I often consider the estuary. So how are we looking to non-traditional partnerships and entities? For example, we often don't look to places like makers and artists and athletes and our arts communities in work around sustainability and climate, but they have so much to offer. So it's now an opportunity for us to explore how everybody can show up and participate in this work, and that's extremely exciting. So if you'd go to the next slide, please. This led to a big, I think, relaunch of our climate work last year in 2019 called CMAP, our Climate Mobilization Action Plan. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but through our process, we really identified 5 action areas. So that's energy, ecosystems, circular economy, land use, and financial systems. And this is a recalibration of our climate work to ensure that all efforts are rooted in equity and resilience. You've heard that as a theme today for sure. So this is how we start thinking about the what we're doing and the how we are doing it. And I think it's an enormous opportunity to use this redevelopment effort to address the enormous inequity that's arisen by the how we've built in our current economy. So when I say that we believe equity must be at the center of all our climate action strategies, it is recognizing that we live in an equitable society. This means that the burdens created by climate change are not felt equally. And so we're dealing with over 400 years of racial oppression and systemic racism that has negatively impacted people of color's access to things like healthcare, education, transportation, and socioeconomic opportunities. So this is true for the effects of climate change too. So put simply, the effects of climate change are worse for some people. So we need to think about how we are really working hard to center that work around equity, resilience, and when I say resilience, I mean social resilience and infrastructure resilience. So you can see a lot of how these efforts are developing across the community at boulder.earth. It's a great website where we are trying to host all of the things that are taking place in our community around climate action. So if you go to the next slide, I wanted to highlight that concept by really targeting 3 particular projects. And I chose these for a reason. I think that they illustrate how we hope to replicate and scale, how they really are rooted in the work that we are doing around equity and resilience, and it creates these unique partnerships. So the first, going left to right, I want to talk a bit about the carbon sequestration. You heard Susie kind of tee this up. Thanks so much, Suze. So in the context of ecosystems, what we believe and what we know is that the science is clear that working with living systems to recapture and strategically use carbon is really the only currently viable pathway to drawing down carbon out of the atmosphere. So in a collaboration with our open space department, the county, and a host of other organizations like USDA, Mad Ag, we've launched this really cool soil sequestration research and development program. So the point of it is to, we've installed test plots, we're experimenting with different treatments, and are conducting ongoing soil, carbon, and soil health monitoring on a good growing number of other open space properties. What's fun about this is that we're actively working on creating a research consortium and best practice sharing network around this research. And it brings us into the potential role of urban landscapes and the importance of educating and involving homeowners. So as we think about coordinating this work through Project Drawdown to create a national database, looking for correlations between practices and the drawdown opportunities and the linkages between food systems and carbon sequestration. So I raised this one because we need some help for sure figuring out how to scale and replicate what we're creating here locally. Stay tuned for opportunities, obviously, to participate through Boulder.earth and also through Be Heard Boulder. And then we'll be rolling out some opportunities to participate in residential landscape makeover pilots this summer. The middle project, I just want to lightly touch on, relates to electrified transit and mobility. This has been a really fun and really productive partnership between Via Mobility, University of Colorado, the school district, and the county to really understand the importance of looking towards electrified transit. And it isn't just about electrified buses, but it's how we use them. It's how we can think about the health and safety with regard to air and air quality issues, but also can we look at issues like shared fleet services where we have a lot of redundancy in our systems right now? Can we look at ways to create mobile power plants because we have batteries on wheels now to add to resilience in our community? So this is a project that has been underway now for about 1.5 years, and it's really starting to take shape. VIA is really been a great partner in this, and so look forward to a lot of interesting results from that. The last that I want to just lightly touch on is this idea of indoor air quality and natural gas combustion. The idea of building electrification has been something that's been front and center for Boulder for a number of years. Turns out combusting natural gas indoors is not the best thing and safest and the healthiest thing to do. So we've been working pretty closely with some researchers at the university on indoor air quality monitoring, and really understanding the implications of combusting natural gas indoor to air quality health and how it relates to issues such as childhood asthma. This is a project that's really going to take shape. And again, this will lead to some very important decisions around infrastructure and programs that we'll offer in terms of electrification in the upcoming years. So keep a very close eye on this one too. We could certainly use some help in figuring out how to scale some of the results of this. So if you go to the next slide. So just to kind of wrap up, you heard Lisa talk about CC4CA. It is the Colorado Communities for Climate Action. This has been such a success story, and I'm really proud of it. And I have to say, some of the best laid plans are created over a beer. But I can recall Susie and I sitting and talking about the importance of policy at the state level and how we really need to create a movement across our communities to be able to apply pressure and shape policy at the state level that affects us here at the local level. And from that conversation and many others, CC4CA was born. And it is a coalition of counties and municipalities across the state of Colorado advocating for strong state and federal climate policy. And we are now 34 communities strong. They are small, they are large, they represent all different types of kind of social and political communities, and it's an incredibly powerful organization, and the intent was to get that group to have a seat at the table when decisions at the state level are being made. And so I'm proud to say that we have a very robust policy agenda, and we've been incredibly successful. So pay attention to that group as well, and you'll see great things coming from CC4CA in the future. So I will wrap up there, and I know that was a lot for those of you listening. I appreciate you all being here. It's important to have these conversations. And I would just conclude by saying, you know, there really is amazing and authentic work taking place in our communities. What you heard today is really just a scratch at the surface. There is just such depth to the work taking place in the cities and the counties, and we didn't want to go through a laundry list of everything taking place, but to give you a sense of what's new and how the thinking around us is evolving the work that we do. So if you have specific questions about anything you've heard today or ideas, we are all ears. With that, I'd like to wrap it up and move us into the Q&A portion of the program. Thank you so much.